Now, we're going to have some agreement. There will be a wall that's going to be built. President Trump is going to build a wall. So that's right. It's called the progressive wall. It's all my brothers and sisters holding hands to stop Donald Trump, stop his agenda, and stop the Republican Party.
Hi everyone, this is Lad Dilgard with another episode of Stand and Speak. Today we're not going to talk about what everyone else is talking about this week, which is the presidential debate earlier. I'm sure you can go anywhere and find a million different opinions on who won, who lost, and what the repercussions are. Today we're going to talk about the control of the United States Senate, which is nearly as important. If Kamala Harris and Tim Walz win the presidential election, the Senate is likely to be the bulwark against much more Green New Deal spending and trillions of dollars of waste and all of the other problems that came with the Biden administration. And if this Senate is controlled by Republicans and Donald Trump wins, then you'll see a rollback of those same policies, hopefully, and maybe a return to sanity and a better economy. So showing the map here, 34 seats are up for election this cycle. And as you can see, the dark blue seats are pretty stellar Democrat areas, not likely to be a Republican victory. The dark red is likely Republican victories. The gray states are the ones that are worth talking about. Last time we talked about Montana and Ohio, and those are close races, but the Republicans are in pretty good shape, especially in Montana. But Bernie Moreno in Ohio has made quite a surge here this last few weeks and is essentially within the margin of error in the latest polls in Ohio. But today we're going to talk about Arizona, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, and what's going on there. As we said before, right now the Senate is controlled 51-49 by Democrats, and Jim Justice in West Virginia is all but assured to win there in West Virginia and taking the seat of Joe Manchin, the Democrat. And that would make the Senate 50-50. So if the Harris-Walz ticket wins, they would cast the deciding vote like they are doing, like they have done several times in the last couple of years, making it a Democrat-controlled Senate. And if Tim Sheehy wins in Montana, which is looking pretty likely, I think he was up by 6 points in the last poll, that would make the Republicans in control, whether Trump won or whether Harris won, with a 51-49 majority. If Bernie Moreno wins in Ohio, that would make it a 52-48 Senate majority, which gives them a little bit of breathing room. These other 5 races are not quite as close, but many are within the margin of error. And we're going to go through the math in some of those and explain how different they are than the presidential elections that are going on in those states. The first state we're going to talk about is Wisconsin, where businessman Eric Hovde is taking on incumbent Senator Tammy Baldwin. And as you can see, Baldwin in the Real Clear Politics average of polls is leading basically 50.6-44. And that has been pretty consistent over a period of time. And if you look at the presidential race in that state, Kamala Harris is trailing Tammy Baldwin in the state. So she's not doing as well as the Democratic Senate candidate. And Donald Trump is outperforming Eric Hovde by 3 points in the Real Clear Politics average of polls for Wisconsin. Now, the best poll that Trump has, Trump is dead even essentially in Wisconsin. That Trafalgar Group has a likely voter poll just at the end of August, where Trump is up by 1. It's essentially margin of error is 3 points or 2.9 points. So this race is essentially tied between Trump and Kamala Harris in Wisconsin. But the Democrat Senate candidate is outperforming the Republican candidate.
As President Trump said, we have 59 days. This is the time. We can't go another 4 years what they're going to put us through. I'm going to tell every one of you, you have to walk away from here today. You have to grab every neighbor you know who's in the middle, every family member that you know that's in the middle, every friend. You got to sit down, you got to talk to them, and you got to get them to come over to our side for President Trump and me to bring this country back. So, are you ready? Are you ready to fight for your country? Are you ready to save the American dream? Let's go get them!
Now, as I said with Bernie Moreno, I don't know how someone could cast a vote for Tammy Baldwin, who has fully supported all of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, far left policies, Green New Deal spending, the infrastructure scam bill, everything that's going on. How could you cast a vote for Baldwin or for Trump and then cast another vote for Baldwin? That just doesn't make any sense. So if any of your friends or family are thinking about doing that, advise them not to. And I understand that a lot of these are maybe blue collar voters. That is some of the detail in these polls that you'll read, is that there's a lot of blue collar voters who are planning to split their ticket either in Ohio or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin.
This is Senator Tammy Baldwin. This is her life partner, Maria Brisbane, a Wall Street exec who makes millions advising the super rich how to make money off industries Tammy regulates. Tammy doesn't get home to Wisconsin most weekends. She'd rather be in New York at Maria's $7 million condo. That's why New Yorkers have given Tammy over $1.3 million. Tammy Baldwin's not Wisconsin's senator anymore. She's the third senator from New York.
The next slide here shows how close the polls have been between Baldwin and Hovde. And as you'll see back, the Hill poll in late August showed essentially a tie. It's a 1 point Baldwin lead with a margin of error of 3.3. 850 likely voters were polled in that. And as we've said before on this show, likely voters are a much better example of what to of the ultimate results. You want to look at likely voters versus registered voters who may or may not show up at the polls. So Eric Hovde has a little bit of work to do, but if Trump voters show up strong in Wisconsin and eke out a win up there, which is entirely possible. It happened in 2016. Republicans hope that Hovde will carry some of those voters with him and ride Trump's coattails to a win and close that gap. Because essentially, the average of polls shows that he's behind, but there are polls that show that they are tied. Next race we're going to look at is Maryland, which normally would not be in play. I think Republicans have not won a Senate seat out of Maryland since 1980. Right now, they have Democrats are running Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks.
So what, do you have a line, a cutoff for abortion access in terms of weeks?
No, I believe that decision belongs to a woman and to her doctor and to her family.
Who's making a big jump from county executive to the United States Senate. That's a huge jump. She won a tough primary there over several others, and she's facing a pretty popular former governor, Larry Hogan. He's not the most conservative Republican in the world, but he would be on the Republican team, and he would be, I guess, a more favorable Republican than a Democrat would be there. So right now, Alsobrooks, she leads 46 to 42, and a pretty healthy lead. And she is underperforming Kamala Harris in the presidential election by a long way, by 14 points. So the polls for president in Maryland strongly favor Kamala Harris, and it's been dark blue for a long time because of all of those bureaucrats being hired in Washington and moving out into Maryland. There are a lot of Democrats there that want that spigot of government spending to keep flowing. So if you look at the presidential race, Kamala Harris is leading Donald Trump in Maryland by, no matter how you look at it, way over 20 points, and will easily win it. One thing that is interesting is that Biden won Maryland by 33 points, whereas Hillary Clinton only won by 25. And Kamala Harris is more in line with the Hillary Clinton numbers. And of course, Trump beat Clinton in the national vote in National Electoral College in 2016. So if these numbers in Maryland for the president are any kind of indicator nationwide, that might not be good news for Kamala Harris. So Larry Hogan is outperforming Donald Trump here. And what we had said about Wisconsin, the flip is true here, that you'd have to wonder why someone would vote for Kamala Harris and then vote for Larry Hogan. But I guess they know Larry Hogan. He's been the governor there and a pretty popular one. So that is the state of affairs there. And so here on the second part of the Maryland equation, also Brooks, and even though she's had a pretty commanding lead, a pretty good lead, there was one poll by Fabrizio that of likely voters that had the two in a tie. So I'd say give also Brooks a little bit of an edge here, but this is not over by a long shot. And you see those polls there at the bottom where Hogan was up by 18. That is before also Brooks won the Democratic primary and became the sole representative on the Democrat side. So now we're going to turn to the Michigan Senate, where former Congressman Mike Rogers is taking on ballpark Frank heiress Elissa Slotkin.
I'm going to walk you through my logic, and I know it's clear that we don't all agree, but I'm going to walk you through my logic in an attempt to be transparent. And I knew from the very beginning that this was going to be a controversial decision, right? That was something I understood from the very beginning. But for me, it was something that was important to do as a matter of so, in September, I'm just going to keep on rolling, folks.
Who recently divorced, achieved some controversy by divorcing her husband and moving in with a donor. And she's held a variety of government jobs over her career, but like a lot of the Democrats who are running, has pretty much been on the government payroll her entire life. And she's rich and a big fundraiser. And I don't know about Mike Rogers, but most of the Republicans in these races are entrepreneurs and former business people.
Thank you, President. Thank you for this, by the way.
Say a couple of words, yeah.
Mr. President, this crowd is fired up because they know when you get into the White House, these folks have your back, too. And they know, and they've been telling America, and they're going to go door to door for you, for me, for the Republican Party, and tell the rest of our state and our country that help is on the way. Yeah. And just one last thing, Mr. President, I had a slight little lead to show that you were a little bit popular in the Republican Party. Donald Trump endorsed me. 2 days later, I was 60 points ahead of our opponents. Wow. Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks for what you're going to do. Thanks for having the courage to stand up when so many would not. Thank you, Mr. President.
Which is, it's kind of curious how that works out. So Slotkin's got a little bit of a lead right now. over Rogers, 47-42 in the polling. And as most people know, Michigan is very tight nationally and very much a key state in the presidential race. She's slightly underperforming Kamala Harris, and Mike Rogers is very much underperforming Donald Trump. So again, Rogers needs to hope that he can ride those coattails of Trump's and win by a squeaker in Michigan. So the presidential race in Michigan has been very tight. The best poll for Trump has been a Epic MRA poll back in late August that had him up by a point. Harris is up by a point in the CBS News poll. Margin of error 3.6. It's tied in Michigan. Going to depend on turnout, and it's going to be very close and very key to who wins the election. So in the Senate, in the polls, Slotkin's last poll was just with registered voters and had her up by 7. Likely voters with Trafalgar had her up by 4 with a margin of error of 2.9. So that has her definitely in the lead. And the best poll for Rogers was Epic by 4 points in a margin of error by 4. So now we turn to Pennsylvania, which will be an interesting race. Dave McCormick is taking on incumbent Bob Casey, whose father was, I think, the governor there in Pennsylvania, and Casey himself is running for his 3rd term.
Would you consider yourself a Biden-Harris Democrat?
Oh, I don't put a label on it.
What issues do you break from her on?
I'm not going to try to itemize issues that we might not have total agreement.
It's a very close race. Casey's up by a few points. Harris and Trump are dead even in what many think is the most important state in the presidential race. The last poll for Trafalgar had Trump up by 2 points with a margin of error of 2.9. Those are likely voters. And CBS, CNN had it just in a dead heat in a tie. So it's going to be very tough. Dave McCormick lost in the primaries the previous time around when John Fetterman was taking on Dr. Oz. And he lost by a little bit to Dr. Oz. And a lot of people wanted him to be the candidate back then instead of Oz to take on Fetterman because he's very accomplished, very, very successful business person. So he is here now and taking on Bob Casey, which always taking on incumbents, always tough. And right now, CBS had Casey up by 7 points, but those are registered voters. The last Trafalgar Group poll had Casey up by 1 point with a margin of error of 3 points. So this could go either way. It's going to be tough, and I know both these guys are out campaigning really hard. So we'll see how this one goes. The last one is Arizona.
Ruben Gallego wants to be your U.S. Senator, but he doesn't want you to know who he really is. The guy who dumped his wife when she was 9 months pregnant, trading her in for a newer model, a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. Tell Ruben to stop blocking the release of his divorce files, because Arizonans should know how he treats those who trust him. Win It Backpack is responsible for the content of this ad.
And this might be the most contentious and bitter of all of the very tough Senate races. Kari Lake is down by about 7 points in the Real Clear Politics average to Ruben Gallego. And Gallego, you can go onto YouTube or anywhere else and find just a litany of acerbic, very mean speeches towards Trump. You could tell that he's just had a personal hatred towards Trump, personal hatreds towards Lake.
Now, we're going to have some agreement. There will be a wall that's going to be built. President Trump is going to build a wall. So that's right. It's called the progressive wall. It's all my brothers and sisters holding hands to stop Donald Trump, stop his agenda, and stop the Republican Party.
He's another candidate who goes to Washington and votes as liberal as he possibly can and then comes back to Arizona and says, I want a strong border and we have to reduce spending or whatever. But he's kind of a fraud. And Kari Lake has tried to point that out, and we'll see if she's able to do that. In the presidential race, Trump is doing well. This was, I think, decided by about 11,000 votes. Arizona was very, very close before, and famously, it was called early for Trump, and then many hours later, it was not, and so on. So Arizona is controversial because the last few election cycles, it's taken a very long time to get all the votes counted. And it's not that heavily populated of a state for that to be the case. So hopefully we will know on election night who wins these, but with Arizona, it's not been the case. So Trump is looking pretty good there in Arizona in the last few polls. Insider Advantage had him up by 1 with a margin of error of 3. It's still very close. The CNN poll had him up by 5. That was back in August. So we will see. Gallego is outperforming Kamala Harris, and Kari Lake is underperforming Donald Trump. So again, we're looking at someone who might go in there and pull the lever for Trump and say, I'm a Trump person. I want the strong borders. I want inflation down. I want all of these things. And then could turn around and vote for Ruben Gallego, who would work super hard to keep any of that stuff from happening. So I still don't understand why you would vote for Trump and then vote for Ruben Gallego. That doesn't make any sense to me. But here you have it in the polls that it looks like as much as 5% of people, Arizona voters, could do that. So Gallego in the last CNN poll had him up. He was up by 3 points with a margin of error of 4.7. So that is tied. In the Insider Advantage poll, to have him up by 4 with a margin of error of 3 points. So that is very close. So it's going to be tight race, and we will see which candidate can pull the most from their presidential candidate of their party to eke out a victory. So that's where we stand right now. If Republicans miraculously ran the table, got a lot of momentum from Trump secured a solid victory, the Senate could be as high as 57 to 43 with Republicans in charge, which would be their biggest majority in many, many, many decades. If Democrats ran the table on all 7 of these races, which is pretty unlikely as well, the best that they could do is 50-50, hoping the Harris-Walz ticket wins and Tim Walz casts the deciding vote in those 50-50 ties, and that would be the Democrat control the Senate. That's pretty unlikely. It's Tim Sheehy is looking like he will win, and you would have to think that some of these states that we went through, there would be a coattail factor, or one of these Republicans would win to secure a solid majority. So that's all I have for today, and thank you for listening, and hit subscribe if you haven't already on YouTube. Find us on X at Stand and Speak, or at Lad Dilgard, LADDILGARD. Hit that thumbs up sign, and we will see you next time around. Thank you.